I would now like to ask Rabbi Gilla Rosen to give us the closing remarks.
Closing benediction.
Closing benediction.
First of all, really, I want to thank mostly Rabbi Cardozo for doing all the work into creating this evening. I want to thank all of the speakers, Rabbi Cardozo and the rest of the speakers. And I think one of the things that was most important was that they were speaking from a very interesting and important and sometimes rather delightful combination of a perspective which comes from a personal, experiential situation of theirs, each one of their own particular personal experiential, but combined with an approach which was deeply rooted in Jewish text, Jewish tradition. And this is a very rare combination for people to be able to talk about their own personal experiences in connection with Jewish tradition and Jewish thought. And the other important aspect was the dialogue between theology and halacha, which is maybe particular to Judaism in the sense of the great difficulty that you can't talk theology unless you're deeply engaged with the halacha. There isn't a theology that is not connected to halacha, and that's why we're involved with the Rambam all the time as an example. There isn't a theology in the same way that there isn't halacha without what's called machshevet halacha, some kind of understanding of what does this halacha mean. Even if sometimes the machshevet halacha is, it doesn't mean it means only its particular self, and don't broaden. That's also a form of machshevet halacha, because you're still thinking from the outside about what is this halachic system saying to me. And therefore, the importance of something like this evening is really the ability for people to talk about a subject so important as this from that mixture of a personal experience and an engagement with the dialogue between halacha and theology. That was the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing, I just wanted to maybe add a note or two. One was something that came up right at the end, which is this whole question of which coming also from the question of the importance of this and its despite its stages. And I would like to say that our ability to contemplate the vastness of human experience has changed dramatically. And it's changed dramatically both from a personal and a Jewish whole sense. From a personal sense, it changed dramatically in great part because of the world of the internet. Global, intellectual globalism, right? A person can now make, I was speaking earlier this evening with somebody who lives in England who has some kind of Jewish yoga, whatever, internet site or Facebook site, and she was explaining to me that she has this magnificent community in this site. Almost none of whom live in England where she lives. Yes, they live in the States, they live in Israel, but she has a community. In other words, we nowadays have community, and sometimes over something very particular, with people all over the world. Now that creates great possibilities, but it also creates a perception of culture and of society which become, and even of ourselves, which becomes far more fragmented and diffuse. So that a certain aspect of Zen Buddhism might be very meaningful for a whole group of people who are discussing it together on some internet site, and it's that particular aspect which then creates some sort of community of ideas, separate from all the rest of it. In fact, they may be very unaware of other aspects. And this is happening, whether we want to or not. This is what is going on, and it's changing our perceptions. And therefore, we need people to say, well, how do we evaluate the larger systems? Because we are attaching to pieces of the systems. And our way of thinking is changing as a result of new forms of global connections. The other thing that's major, and Rabbi Cardozo just mentioned, is having our own nation, which does change completely our dynamic with the other religions, whether we meant it to or not. And these are both things that we're not meaning, we're not deciding should happen, but they are happening. And having our own nation does create a different dynamic with the other religions and greater importance. So both as individuals and nationally, there are major changes. And these create, I think, an existential necessity for this kind of evaluation now. And this kind of questioning about relationship. Because the relationships are there, they're being changed, whether we're becoming aware of it or not. That was the second thing. The third thing I wanted to mention had to do with the Rambam. And before the question that came to me about the Rambam, it was something that came to mind as some of the speakers, especially as either Gelman was speaking, but others as well. There's a piece in the Gemara where Rava says, "Ha'oved me'ava v'yira pater." Somebody who worships idols from ahava, love, or va here means or fear, is pater. He's actually, what's pater? He wouldn't get, he's not supposed to do it, but if he did it, he wouldn't get the normal punishment for worshipping idols. So what does it mean if you worship idols from love or fear? I mean, why else would you? What does it mean? And it's very frightening because that phrase "ava v'yira" is how we think we worship God. So how could that be pater? That's the real thing. So Rashi understands "ava" and "yira" there means, and the halacha is according to Rava. Rashi understands there that "ava" and "yira" means if you worship an idol out of love for somebody, you fall in love with someone. And that person says to you, well, I'll only be yours if you worship this idol. Well, you haven't really, you don't believe in it, so you're pater. In the same way, if you do it out of fear because you're scared, right, you should give up your life, but if you don't, you're pater. Right? That's what Rashi understands. And now the love and fear are for some people. And that's not what the Rambam understands. The Rambam understands if you worship an idol out of love, it's a beautiful ceremony, there's beautiful singing, there's some beauty in it. Or out of fear, you're scared that God with a small g will get to you. Yes, you're pater. You didn't really worship an idol. In other words, it's very interesting. After all the discussion of idolatry, it's actually quite hard to be an idolater, according to Rambam. You have to be quite an abstract philosopher, because if you do it just because you're scared, right, that your life won't be good. He'll punish you if you don't worship it. Or you do it because it's beautiful and you'll love it. It's not good enough. You've got to really understand divinity. You've got to really understand. You've got to really understand what God is about. It's not sufficient that you're in some kind of give-me relationship, right, to be an idolater. And I didn't hear any of you using this idea, but I think it's actually very interesting. Of course, the flip side of it, and this has to do again with looking outward, and then what does it cause me to do when I look inward, is what's the flip side of it? If you worship God, you're not really doing it. If you're doing it just because, well, it's beautiful and there was nice singing today, or because you're scared God's going to punish you, there's something far beyond that that's got to be if you're going to be somebody serving God. And that's where looking outward and thinking about what does it mean to be another can sometimes help one to look inward and serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you again soon.